Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the faith-filled riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Our religious freedoms are under attack. Buried in the NDP Liberal-dominated Finance Committee's December 2024 report, pre-budget consultations in advance of the 2025 budget, lies recommendation 430, a dagger aimed at the heart of our churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples. This radical proposal calls on the government to, quote, amend the Income Tax Act to provide a definition of a charity which would remove the privileged status of advancement of religion as a charitable purpose, end quote. If this becomes law, nearly 40% of Canada's charities, over 30,000 religious organizations, will lose their charitable status, plunging our communities into chaos. If Liberals win a fourth term, they will be desperate for cash. Most houses of worship will be forced to shut their doors. Without charitable status, these groups lose tax exemptions and the ability to issue donation receipts. For many, donations will dry up. Studies show religious Canadians give generously, with frequent service goers leading as top donors. Cash-strapped, congregations will face crippling property taxes and operational taxes. Picture your local church, mosque, or synagogue, a place of solace, charity, and community, shuttered. Its building sold off to developers or left to rot. Cardis estimates that religious groups provide $18.2 billion in annual socioeconomic benefits, from soup kitchens to refugee support. Strip that away, and our society crumbles. The NDP Liberals might claim churches can transfer assets to other charities to dodge this disaster. Don't be fooled. The Income Tax Act allows asset transfers to, quote, qualified donees, quote, end quote, but in advancement, if and only if advancement of religion is axed, few religious groups will even qualify. And that comes from the Income Tax Act, Section 188. Secular activities focused on poverty or education won't take on a church's mission or its costly heritage building. Most congregations lack the legal savvy or funds to navigate this mess, and the CRA's strict rules mean many transfers could be rejected as sham deals. The result? A 100% revocation tax on assets, forcing liquidation. Your place of worship becomes a government cash grab. This isn't just about money. It's an assault on faith. The Liberals and NDP, backed by the atheist activities like the BC Humanist Association, want to erase religion from public life. And that comes from BCHA, January 5th, 2025. They ignore how religious charities fill gaps government can't, feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, fostering hope. The Conservatives fought this in committee, dissenting from the report while the NDP Liberals cheered it on. The next election is your chance to send a message. Only Conservatives will protect our religious communities. Contact your MP now. Demand they reject recommendation 430. Our faith, our charities, our Canada hang in the balance. Let's rise up and defend what matters. Conflict of interest Carney had a meltdown in front of a microphone again. On Monday, conflicted Carney was asked to name the assets he had placed in his secret blind trust. His initial response was not great. Take a look.
Hello.
Mr. Carney, Stephanie Levitt with the Globe and Mail. We understand that you have now placed your assets in a blind trust, so you don't know what's happening to them going forward, but you knew what they were going into that blind trust. So what are they?
Look, Stephanie, I follow the rules of the Ethics Commissioner. I'm following them well in advance of any of the requirements, as you know, because I know you know this. You know that these requirements come into effect in months. We're talking days after I became Prime Minister. So I'm complying with the rules of the Ethics Commissioner, going through the processes and all those things that are necessary.
The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
As someone who spent most of his time in life in the private sector, there's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to look.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will.
So Barton was one of his biggest fans. During the leadership election, Barton aggressively interrogated Freeland while giving Carney a free pass. Yet Carney accused her of having ill intent. This is classic Liberal playbook. If you don't agree with the current thing that Liberals are doing, they accuse you of having evil reasons. The Liberals repeatedly claimed that if you didn't support their carbon tax, you wanted the planet to burn. But the Liberals are suggesting that if you don't believe they canceled the carbon tax, then you're an American. Carney claims he followed all the rules. It just so happens that the rules allow him to keep his wealth secret until after the election. Canadians will have no idea what conflicts of interest Carney has. We know he has stock options in Brookfield. We know Brookfield took out a $250 million loan with a Chinese bank last fall. We know the communists who control China tried to influence the Liberal leadership campaign to hurt Freeland. We know from media reports that Mark Carney was very likely owed future bonus payments from the multi-billion-dollar Brookfield funds he personally set up and managed. And these bonus payments are directly tied to the performance of investments he made at Brookfield. Performance that may have had the benefit of Carney knowing the advice he gave the Liberals. So, what else do we know about the specific Brookfield funds set up by Carney? Well, Brookfield doesn't provide a full list of projects and companies it invested in. We know billions have been invested into solar panels, wind turbines, infrastructure, heat pumps, alternative fuels, and countless other sectors associated with the so-called green transition. But also important is the question of which companies and industries Brookfield and Carney bet against, wanting certain sectors to succeed over others. And perhaps most importantly, which countries did Brookfield and Carney bet on, and which did they bet against? Brookfield is not the most transparent company, but it's slightly more transparent than Carney personally. And through its public filings, we have some hints. Mark Carney was appointed chair in the latter half of 2020. Using the most recently available data for 21 to 2023, we can see that Brookfield's reported assets in the US increased by 23% and declined in Canada by 4%. That's right. Just as Carney moved his headquarters to America while he was chair, Brookfield was investing more and more into the United States while pulling back from Canada for years. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why Carney is so hostile when asked these questions. We also know that Mark Carney handed over what he called a full and robust conflict of interest management plan to the Ethics Commissioner last week. And yesterday, he bluntly denied having any conflicts of interests. How can somebody claim to have no conflicts of interest when just last week he told the commissioner he has so many conflicts that he needs a full and robust plan to manage all of them? Why won't Carney share this supposed conflict of interest plan with Canadians so they can see for themselves? Brookfield investments touch on a huge area of public policy: energy policy, environment policy, industrial policy, taxation policy, and infrastructure policy. I could go on and on. Is Carney planning on recusing himself from government discussions and decisions in these areas? This so-called blind trust of his does not protect him. Why? Because these aren't like stocks and bonds such as normal Canadians have that a trustee can buy and sell freely. No. He raised the money from international billionaires and he made the investments. He knows exactly what's in there. And those Brookfield funds are locked in with long-term contracts. The only people blind to Carney's assets and conflicts are Canadians because he refuses to tell them the truth. Mark Carney is twisting himself into a pretzel trying to hide his assets and conflicts from Canadians and avoiding answering any questions. I'm not sure exactly how much attention Mark Carney's been paying to politics the last decade, but conflict of interest is a very serious thing. The Carney-Trudeau Liberals have been repeat offenders when it comes to conflict of interest laws. Justin Trudeau himself twice. If Mark Carney is going to go to Canadian voters to ask for a fourth Liberal term, he needs to come clean. Carbon Tax Carney earned his nickname. For a decade, he's been a champion for carbon taxes. The UN appointed him to be a carbon tax cheerleader. He founded an alliance of big banks to force companies to adopt climate disclosures. He even said Trudeau's carbon tax was too low. Mark Carney believes in carbon taxes with all his heart. Even though he claims he's abandoning the carbon tax, he said he was only doing so because conservatives have won the debate with Canadians. Cowardly Carney can't defend his own personal convictions. If Carney can't even stand up to Pierre, he won't be able to stand up to the President of the United States. Carney will sell Trump the music rights to O Canada if it helps Liberals stay in power. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre announced on Monday that he will axe the entire carbon tax law, including the federal backstop that requires the provinces to impose an industrial carbon tax. This will take the carbon tax off Canadian steel, aluminum, natural gas, food production, concrete, and all other major industries, lowering prices so Canadians can bring home powerful paychecks. We will axe the entire carbon tax as part of our Bring It Home tax cut on work, investment, energy, and home building. Not only will this lower the cost for working Canadians, it'll also boost our economy, allowing our companies to become competitive again with the United States. Provinces will continue to have the freedom to address the issues as they like, but will have the freedom to get rid of these industrial taxes that the federal government has forced them to impose. Poilievre also promised to use technology, not taxes, to protect our environment by expanding the eligibility of the Clean Technology and Clean Manufacturing Investment Tax Credits, ITCs. Heavy industries that make products with lower emissions than the world average will be rewarded, bringing jobs and protection home and bringing global emissions down. With lower taxes, we will unleash a massive boom and bring home paychecks and production from the United States and other countries. Our factories, mines, and mills will be buzzing with the work of welders, carpenters, pipe fitters, and heavy machine operators and assembly line workers. The full carbon tax, which lets the Carney Trudeau Liberals keep the tax and raise the tax, is still in place today, even after Mark Carney tried to hide the tax just a few days ago. That law will still raise the tax every year until it hits 61 cents a litre in 2030, unless Conservatives win a majority in the next election. Carney will hide the tax for the next 2 months until after the election's over. Then he will bring back a bigger shadow carbon tax without any rebate. All Carney has to do is flip a switch to turn the tax back on gas, heat, farmers, and everyone else. Carney admitted his shadow carbon tax will hit Canadian businesses hard, making it even more expensive than Trudeau's industrial carbon tax and making life even more expensive for all Canadians. The combination of Trump's tariffs and Carney's carbon tax will drive steel, aluminum, and many other heavy industries out of Canada altogether. Workers will lose wages, and families will pay more. Carney even promised that our companies, our largest companies, are going to pay. Mark Carney has a long history of doing exactly what the President of the United States wants. Just 6 days after Trump first threatened to attack Canada's economy with tariffs, Carney moved his company and Canadian jobs to New York City and then lied, saying he had nothing to do with it. Only Conservatives will restore Canada's promise that anyone from anywhere can do anything, and that hard work gets you a great life in a beautiful house on a safe street, protected by solid borders and brave troops under a proud flag. Conservatives will axe the entire carbon tax to put Canada first and take back control of our economy from the Americans. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant.